While at the bank, Johnny Storm is witness to a robbery by a new costumed criminal named Paste Pot Pete, a criminal that uses specially made paste to trap his victim. After Paste Pot robs the bank, Johnny tries to stop him. However, Pete manages to escape when he gets on a motorcycle as an escape vehicle. The Torch catches up with Paste Pot just as he has succeeded in stealing a missile from the military in the hopes of selling it to foreign powers. The Torch is unable to stop Paste Pot initially because he overtaxed his flame powers, allowing Paste Pot to capture the Torch and bind him to the rocket he stole. He launches it, hoping to kill the Torch. Johnny's powers revive enough for him to free himself and get back on the trail of Paste Pot Pete. The Torch tracks him down and manages to stop him by melting his truck. However, Paste Pot manages to escape when he uses a paste line to hitch a ride on an airplane. His escape is a hollow victory, as he ends up falling out in the middle of the ocean. In prison, the wizard is allowed to work in the prison hospital due to his good behavior. However, this plays into the wizard's plan as he collects a series of chemicals that allow him to melt a hole in his jail cell and escape from prison. When he hears news of the wizard's escape, Johnny wants to go after him, but his sister Sue won't let him. Johnny creates a duplicate torch out of flame to trick his sister while he goes after his old foe. Johnny is able to easily fight off the wizard's weapons. Realizing what Johnny has done, Sue goes after him and ends up getting captured by the wizard, and Johnny is also captured shortly after. The two work together and free themselves from the wizard's trap and capture him, and take him back into custody. Later, Sue scolds Johnny for going off on his own. After a training session, Johnny is visited by Carl Zonte, the world's greatest acrobat, to convince the Torch to join him. Convincing him that he is the most valuable member of the Fantastic Four and that he could make a living working with the acrobat, the two form a partnership as the Torrid Twosome. Zonte tricks the Torch into breaking into a bank vault, telling him that somebody was trapped inside. However, the Torch realizes the truth, and when he doesn't want to go along with Zonte to rob the bank, the acrobat uses a hose to douse the Torch's flame. However, as the acrobat is escaping the bank, he is confronted by the other members of the Fantastic Four. The Torch recovers his flame powers and helps his fellow Fantastic Four members in capturing Zonte and turning him over to the police. Realizing that he made a mistake in teaming up with Zonte, Johnny rejoins the Fantastic Four and is welcomed back with open arms. Johnny is once more not included in the planning for the Fantastic Four's next adventure. Johnny decides to prove himself to the others by taking on the Submariner one-on-one. Traveling out across the ocean, Johnny's search for Namor gets off to a bad start when his flame wears out and he has to stop on a ship to recuperate, is pegged as a stowaway and is forced to swab the deck until his powers return. When his powers return to him, Johnny manages to get the attention of the Submariner, who accepts his challenge. However, Namor has the edge of the Torch, and eventually douses his flame and sends him back to the mainland on the back of a dolphin. However, the Torch restores his flame and goes for a rematch. This time he manages to trap Namor in an underwater avalanche and is later picked up by a ship and returned to the mainland. Namor, however, manages to escape. Returning home, Johnny collapses in bed from exhaustion. When Sue checks on him later, she figures he's spent the whole day sleeping. The Human Torch cracking down on Scar, Tobin's crime operations. Tobin has become desperate to find a way of dispose of the Torch once and for all. He ended up hiring the Painter, a former counterfeiter who was caught by the Human Torch when the Torch noticed that his counterfeits had obvious flaws. The Painter has a set of paints that turned whatever he painted into reality. The Painter explained that when he escaped from prison he had found a secret cavern where he found hieroglyphics from an alien race explaining how the paints left behind work. The Painter then used his paints to create various traps to try and stop the Torch. His final plan involved creating fakes of the other members of the Fantastic Four to lure the Torch into a room where he is seemingly destroyed by a grenade. However, the Torch managed to avoid his fate because he realized that he was dealing with fakes when he noticed several flaws in the painter's artwork, including that none of the other FF members had the famous Fantastic Four insignia on their uniforms. Tracking the painter back to Tobin's lair, the Torch burned all the paints and took all the criminals to jail, where the Torch revealed to the painter how he saw through his traps. Growing bored and restless during a meeting with the other Fantastic Four members, Reed allows Johnny to leave early. After stopping a fire, he flies past an old eccentric's home where the owner is chasing teens off his property with dogs. Going to check things out, he meets the man the townspeople call the Sorcerer, realizing that the old man is a collector of old mystical items. When the Sorcerer wants to be left alone, the Torch is more than happy to help the curmudgeonly old man by surrounding his home with a wall of flame. However, the Sorcerer is even more furious and Johnny takes it down. After the Torch departs, the Sorcerer opens his recent acquisition, Pandora's box. With the box he is able to summon evils that represent different aspects and elements and use them to try and rob a bank. When the Torch tries to stop him, the Sorcerer summons a water demon to douse the Torch's flames. Gloating, the Sorcerer gives Johnny his choice of death out of Pandora's box. Johnny chooses flame. This works against the Sorcerer because Johnny absorbs the fire and uses his flame powers to get hold of the box. In doing so, the Sorcerer is exposed to his next chosen attack on the Torch, a fear demon, which strikes the Sorcerer and puts him in a catatonic state. Johnny turns him over to the police and then tosses the box into the ocean, and returns to his comrades and is less than modest about what he did that day. After a training session, the Human Torch goes over his scrapbook of past adventures, and recalls his previous battles against the Wizard and Pastepot Pete, wondering what his old foes are up to today. Coincidentally enough, at that very moment Pastepot Pete is busy breaking the Wizard out of prison so that the two may conspire on how to defeat their mutual foe. Using the Wizard's suit that mimics the Human Torch's powers, the two begin to commit crimes that would cause the press to accuse the Human Torch of being a spy. However, when the Torch sets a trap to lure the two crooks to try and rob one of the world's richest men, the Torch himself gets captured and placed into a giant hall of mirrors by his foes. The Torch, however, uses his flame powers to break free and manages to capture the two crooks and turn them over to the police. While witnessing the Human Torch stopping a crime, Orson Kasloff dwells on the fact that he is an underappreciated scientist and that he could make a better living as a master criminal using his scientific mind to pull off perfect crimes. After his first attempt at burgling fails, he decides he'll end the threat of the Human Torch to criminals everywhere. Creating a chemically treated suit of armor and weapons made of asbestos, Kasloff becomes the Asbestos Man. Challenging the Human Torch to a public battle, he manages to outsmart the Human Torch, delivering a humiliating defeat to the hero and giving Asbestos Man the credentials to get hired on by a local crime boss. However, when he pulls off an actual crime, the Torch challenges Asbestos Man again, using his flame powers to eat all the oxygen around Asbestos Man instead of trying to burn him, forcing Asbestos Man and his crooks to surrender. Torch's popularity has waned due to negative editorials made by newscaster Ted Braddock that have been turning public opinion against Johnny. When a new villain known as the Eel steals Project X, a miniature atomic pile, the Torch, with the help of Charles Lawrence, the inventor of the device, goes after the Eel. When the device is at risk of explosion, the Torch tries to convince the Eel to give over the device. The Eel does not believe him and continues his attack. The Torch is forced to use his powers to take down the Eel's copter and battle him on the ground. The Torch manages to capture Project X, leaving the Eel with the arriving authorities. Johnny takes the bomb out to a safe place where it detonates and he attempts to absorb the heat and flames from the explosion. He succeeds but is seriously injured, and Reed Richards uses a device to try and heal Johnny. After Johnny recovers, Braddock retracts all his negative statements about the Human Torch and declares him a hero. Late again for one of his dates with Doris Evans, Johnny arrives to be witness to Dory's father firing his gardener for wasting his time on a device that stimulates plant growth. Vengeful, and after his device is struck by lightning, giving it the ability to make him control plants totally, the gardener becomes the criminal known as Plantman. As Plantman, Smithers tries to frame Dory's father with robbing the store in which he works and planting evidence pointing blame to Mr. Evans. Johnny vows to clear Mr. Evans' name and ends up battling with the Plantman. The two are at a match until the Torch begins to gain the lead. The Plantman then escapes by hiding in a tree, planning to strike again with a more devious plan. Afterward, Doris thanks Johnny for clearing her father's name. After a training session with his sister, the Human Torch learns of an antique car show which boasts that Captain America will make an appearance. While they're seeing his childhood idol, some thieves steal the box office receipts for the show, and Torch and Captain America manage to stop them. However, Cap tells the Torch to go away, and steals all the glory. Later that night, Cap springs the crooks out of jail. When the Torch learns of this, he goes after the criminals who admit that Cap planned the whole thing. After a chase across the city, the Torch manages to catch Captain America and unmasks him, revealing him to be the Torch's old foe, the Acrobat. Afterwards, the Torch wonders what became of the real Captain America. Summoned by Reed Richards to the Baxter Building, the Human Torch is informed that his next mission is to stop the Sandman, who has just escaped from prison. Finding the crook, the Torch is told that Sandman will only face Spider-Man, as Spider-Man is the hero who had put him behind bars. The Torch then disguises himself as Spider-Man and issues a challenge to the villain to fight him one-on-one. However, the Sandman gets the drop on Spider-Man and attacks him from behind. The Torch flames on, burning his imitation Spider-Man suit in the process, and tries to fight Sandman again. And even when doused in water and unable to use his flame powers, the Torch manages to gain the upper hand and defeat Sandman, turning him over to the authorities. The real Spider-Man, who had been making his way towards the scene of the battle, does not arrive until the fight is over. Spider-Man expresses relief that the Torch is okay, but he is also worried that the Torch may be a more successful teenage superhero than he is.